Hello and welcome to Europa Universalis 4. I am Lord Forwind, here with a guide on how to play Milan. So, astute people will have already noticed I am not starting in 1444. I am starting in 1447 for one important reason, and that is because this is the year where Milan is not a monarchy. You start out the game as Milan in a monarchy, a standard, feudal monarchy and everything. Same thing as Mantua over here and everyone else. However, you start out with a very old ruler, and when he dies, usually in 1447 or thereabouts, you have the option of turning into what is called the Ambrosian Republic, named after Saint Ambrosia, I think. I don't know my Catholic saints as well as I should. Anyhow, it is a republic. It is one of the better government forms in the game. It has plus 10% infantry combat ability and 1 diplomatic relations from your Milanese ideas, but in terms of the government, you get another 5% morale of armies and 10% national tax modifier, which means just basically starting out, you have a bonus to tax income, morale, infantry combat, and more relations than your average nation, which means Milan is one of the actual stronger nations in Central Europe. You do start as part of the HRE, which is nice. You can stay in the HRE if you like, but you do receive a penalty if you stay in it too late, and it's pretty nasty, so I advise leaving it at that point. But you are definitely the strongest of the Italian city-states outside of maybe Venice and the Pope later on, but you're a very rich, relatively powerful nation for your size. As Milan, you start off with, I think, the highest developed province in the game? I think so. You start off with 30 developed in your actual capital province of Milan, Milano. You also start off with some pretty valuable other land. You've got 3 farmland provinces, which is amazing, one at 20, one at 19, and another hill province at 16, which is amazing. You start off with a fairly good size land force limit. You are also inside Italy, so you have a chance of getting the Renaissance relatively quickly. You can actually get it, but if you don't get it, it will spread to your lands a lot faster than it will the rest of the HRE in Europe, which is really nice. You have 1 province here held by Venice, which you'll want to get back relatively quickly. But other than that, you're in a really good spot to start out. Now I'm going to disappear briefly into the government mechanics. So there's a great video out there, you guys can look it up. I think it's called The Power of Infinite Elections or something. It's a really good video, but essentially here's a brief summary. You have elections every 4 years, cost 10 Republican tradition. You've got pretty good government form, but the big thing is you can use your elections, since they're so short, you can build up to a very high level ruler relatively quickly, which is a lot difficulter to do, a lot harder to do in other republics. Of course, as a republic, you also can put your ruler into a general rather easily. But using this mechanic of the elections and strengthen government and not keeping rulers around if they're over 55, so like this guy you wouldn't want to keep around for another election. If they're below that, if they die, if they don't have good stats, you can essentially have really, really, really good rulers for the rest of the game. Obviously, republics, you get to choose between you get 4 in one monarch stat and 2 in the other, which is rather annoying, but it does allow you to focus your government where you would like it to go. Every election after that, they gain 1 monarch point. The technical sweet spot in turning maximizing monarch points is having a 666 ruler, obviously. But the point comes on your 3rd election, where your 4 monarch stat has then shifted into a 6 monarch point military, diplo, or admin ruler. Electing again then only after gains you 2 more monarch points per election, whereas before it was getting you 3 extra monarch points per election. So the efficiency does drop at that point. But not significantly enough. Having a great ruler, a high stats ruler, is amazing. Plus, if you have national focuses, you can focus in another category. And then if you elect a military ruler, both your admin and your military will have above average income, whereas you will be neglecting diplomatic power. really good government. It's pretty stable. Your neighbors don't like you for it. You can't do royal marriages, but overall it's really strong. Other things for Milan. You have some really good ideas. You have a negative 10% idea cost, plus 1 prestige, negative 10 development, negative 15% mercenary maintenance, 5% tech cost, which is really good, but be a lot stronger if it was earlier in your idea tree. Global trade power, 10% stability, and 20% national manpower. Overall, Milan has some of the, I'd say above average. They don't have some of the best ideas in the game, but they're really solid. Specifically, both the tech cost and the idea cost are rather nice. The idea cost being first means you're actually going to start saving monarch points from taking ideas earlier than everyone else in the game, I think outside of maybe Florence. And it'll also help you get further down. You want to try and hit the 5% technology cost as soon as possible. Obviously, you won't be able to do that till you hit your third idea group, so 10 tech level, admin tech, so 1500 or so. But once you do, that will of course start saving you lots of monarch power as well. Plus you have the development costs, so you can develop your land a lot cheaper. In fact, playing tall as Milan is a very viable strategy, seeing as Italian city-states are rich and there are a fair amount of farmlands, grasslands. There's some hills, but they're not too terrible. The other thing that sets Milan as a really good nation to play is they have the ability to form Italy if they own those provinces. Sadly, outside of Milan itself, the other nations you need are all located to the south, 2 of which are located in the Papacy and 1 in Venice, which makes it a little bit harder to take the lands. But the rest of the land you can pick up pretty easily. You border, I think, 3 or 4 of the states you need. Obviously, you can't form that till you hit Admin Tech 10, which is about the same time you'll hit your cheaper tech cost. And then you can form Italy. You'll get a chance in new traditions and ambitions. You'll also turn into a monarchy. So if you like the Republic, don't do this. I recommend you take the Italian ideas. If you do, the Italian ideas are ridiculously strong compared to the Milanese ideas, which aren't bad, but they're a lot stronger. So, in terms of expansion, you have quite a few options open to you. You are part of the HRE, which means early on, you are actually one of the few nations that can establish a large presence in the southern HRE without a massive problem, specifically taking out Switzerland. For Switzerland, they usually have no allies and they're rather weak and have no real defensive ability outside of forts. You're in a perfect position to invade them. You can have a force limit of, I think it starts out at 13, but now it's 15 at this point in time. I could be wrong, which is more than the 9 or 10 needed to siege the forts. Switzerland tends not to have any allies. You're a lot stronger. One of your better allies, if you get it, is Savoy here. They tend to be pretty good. The other one that's fairly good, if one can do it, is Austria. Obviously, once you start the game in 1444, which is when most people start, you'll have the ability to do royal marriages and stuff, which will get you a chance to get Austria as an ally. Another option is France. Rather bizarrely, it must be historical, likes you. There's in fact events where you can either improve relations with Austria at the cost of France or France at the cost of Austria. So you can usually get an alliance with one of those two. Other nations that can be good early on is the Pope, but of course remember you have to take both Rome and Ancona here to actually form Italy. But outside of that, the lands here are rich and relatively easy to take. The problem is, of course, you're part of the HRE, so you can't take more than 1 or 2 provinces in a war, especially with their level of development. I mean, 22 development, that's a lot of development to take in a war, really, early on. So you'll only be able to take 1 or 2 early on. The exception, of course, is Switzerland up here, whose lands are relatively terrible compared to Italy's. I advise if you do take land, you try and either cut them in half through here, Zurich or St. Collins, or take this province here, Graubünden or whatever. Because it has a fort, it means further invasions of Switzerland are easier. Of course, contrary to that, you could ally yourself with Switzerland and go after Savoy because you could feed Switzerland 2 provinces, but I recommend taking Switzerland because then it allows you, if you want, before I think it's 1490, to be able to take some of these southern lands. You can take out Baden, can't take Ravensburg, obviously they're a free city, so that's why taking Zurich or St. Gallen's is better than this province. But you can probably poach 1 or 2 provinces up here, and then when you leave the HRE, they will leave with you, which will give you all this extra land here you wouldn't get if you just stayed in Italy. Other thing to remember is Venice, despite having allies, vassals, and leading a trade league, is not part of the HRE, which means you can expand into them fairly easily. You have a core province here, which you can get back, which is 20 development, which is crazy. But Verona, Treviso, and Friuli here are also really good provinces. If you can get Venetia itself, obviously good for you. It's really powerful. If you're really ambitious and you're absolutely crazy, you can try and help Austria, or whoever the emperor is, reign in northern Italy. In order to do that, they have to control all this Italian provinces. You have to be part of the HRE. You have to take these provinces, and you have to take these provinces. It's doable. It's difficult. It's a lot easier as Austria. But if you get the land, I believe, I've tested this once, because it's difficult to do, the AI will then reign in northern Italy, which means this land will not leave the HRE, which means when you form all that land in Italy, once you control it all, you can then turn back into a monarchy, or stay as a monarchy if you didn't turn into the Ambrosian Republic, and try and become HRE emperor. And controlling all of Italy and being part of the HRE makes taking over the HRE emperorship and then, forcing through the reforms a lot easier. Obviously, if you form Italy, you will break out of the empire. I believe, unless you are emperor at the time. It might be one of those ones like Germany, you form it even as emperor, you leave. I don't know the actual interactions. It's a little confusing. But I believe if you're emperor and you control the land, then you can form into Italy. Just saying. Which is really cool if you can do it. Also, if you really want to mess with the game, if you could somehow kind of mess up the game, you could then get down to HRE, always inherited by the same country, and then turn into a republic, which messes the game all up. I think that's still doable. It used to be. It was pretty powerful. You get reforms rather fast because the death of a republic leader counts as the death of a monarch. It's rather weird. I believe it still works. I could be wrong though. So if it isn't, please somebody correct me. In terms of expansion, this is a bit tricky. So on this side, you're bordered by Savoy. Montferrat is, interestingly, at this point in time, not a vassal of Savoy, but I believe they start as a vassal, which means you can't expand that way unless you want to pick a fight with Savoy, who usually allies themselves to France. If they don't, you can conquer them. They tend to be a fairly good ally for you, as I said earlier. Genoa down here looks really juicy and easy to conquer, but they usually lead a trade league, and at least initially, they have these 3 provinces over here and 1 down here, which means actually getting enough war score to actually take a lot of their lands is rather difficult. You can usually take their 2 land provinces, but then they'll just retreat to Corsica and their other islands. If you can, I honestly advise you to get Corsica before you take this province here. You want to take this, obviously, it's their capital. If you do control that, that will give you part of the control of the Genoa trade node. Sadly, your land is kind of split at the beginning between Venice and the Genoa trade node. Your capital is in Venice, but the lands you're going to take here will be in Genoa. It's a little annoying that it's split like this. Obviously, if you can, steer it to the Venice trade node, because you'll control more of that once you conquer this region. If not, the Genoa trade node tends to be one of the wealthier trade nodes in the game, being an end trade node, obviously, like Venice, but drawing from more locations. So Genoa is a very easy target to beat at some point, unless they've got good allies. Mantua here tends to survive a lot longer than they should, because usually they tend to have allies, but if they've rivaled you and they don't have good allies, by all means conquer them. There's pretty much no one in Italy 1-on-1 or even 1-on-2 that can give you a run for their money. As you can see, you could easily beat Mantua and Genoa here with your army. Eliminate one, turn on, and eliminate the other. Venice takes a little while longer. I recommend you wait a little bit till the Ottomans fight Venice, or they start to decline, or you can get Austria involved in the war. Sometimes you can offer Austria land, like give them Istra here in exchange for calling them to the war and getting some of their other lands. Pretty good. Ferrara is a 1 province, 2 province nation, but one province here that you want to take early on, Moderna, because that opens you up to be able to attack both Florence, the Pope, and obviously just gets you further down Italy. Florence you want to try to eliminate early on if you can, because otherwise the Pope tends to eliminate them. Also, left unchecked, they tend to get a huge tech lead and are really hard to kill. They don't tend to have a lot of good allies though. The Pope, on the other hand, is definitely your biggest challenge. They tend to ally themselves to Aragon, Austria, or France, which means you have to wait till one of them is not going to join the war or attack like Lucca, who's allied to the Pope, stuff like that. It's kind of a pain. But Milan, overall, the countries in Italy, is in the best position to unite Italy and form Italy. Once you form Italy, you can do whatever you want, really. You're really powerful. You're probably as strong or stronger than France, owning all that land. It's quite an interesting adventure. Other than that, there's not much to say. Switzerland should be, if you can, early expansion target. Otherwise, Venice is your best bet. If you wait till 1490, these countries won't be in the HRE, so you don't have to deal with any of that unlawful territory penalty. On the other hand, you can try and keep them in the empire, go with the whole be loyal to the emperor, become the emperor, take over. Unfortunately, in order to do that, you can't form the Ambrosian Republic, which is a little bit difficult. But you've got really good starting ideas. Your ideas fall off a little bit in the middle, but then they pick up briefly 2/3 of the way through your idea, and then they fall off at the end. So, Milan's a really good nation, fun to play as. You've got 85 development to start. You can easily, just by conquering Italy, build it tall and be equivalent to an Austria that's conquered half the HRE, just because of how poor the land is. Italy is probably the richest area in the game, and it will only get richer as the nations develop further. The only equivalent to some of the lands in France. So, that is a brief guide to how to play Milan. If you guys have any questions or comments, let me know. The Ambrosian Republic, check out that other video I mentioned if you didn't understand my explanation. But suffice to say, the Ambrosian Republic is a really good form of government, and being a republic, if you know how to play republics, is really strong. Overall, I would rate Milan easy to moderate. They're not a great power yet, but they can become a great power without much trouble. They're definitely one of the larger nations in the HRE at the beginning, and they've got lots of expansion options. Even if they don't look great, you've got a lot of development you can expand into. I like playing as Milan. Milan and Florence are really the only two you play in Italy outside of the Pope sometimes. Venice really doesn't expand into Italy itself. So that is it for this guide. If you guys have any questions, comments, or advice or other strategies, please leave them below. If you enjoyed the video and want to see other ones, check out my other guides, subscribe, and hit the notification buttons. You're alerted to new videos coming out. And overall, though, just thank you guys for watching. If you've gotten this far, I'm very impressed. And I hope to see you guys in another video. Bye for now.